This week on Writers Inc.
For me, I didn't know shit about writing. I didn't know anything about how to find an agent. I didn't know about the publishing industry. And I figured A, by being in New York, and B, by being at an MFA program, that would give me a chance.
J.K. Rowling was nearly homeless when she wrote the first Harry Potter book. Stephen King penned Carrie on a small desk wedged between a washer and dryer. James Patterson worked in advertising and famously crafted the Toys R Us theme song long before becoming an author. Join New York Times bestseller J.D. Barker and a panel of industry powerhouses as they pull back the curtain on some of the world's most prolific authors. Where did they start? What is their process? The biggest names in publishing all have origin stories, all have tips and secrets. What does it take to consistently top the bestseller lists and become a household name? Get your notepad out. School's in session. This is Writers Inc.
Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
Patrick O'Donnell.
Kevin Tumlinson.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. So my voice is effed. I did that. I was sick all last week, and then I did that thriller school on I think it was Tuesday. And talking for 2 hours just completely destroyed my voice. So if I sound like Kevin, then that's why. Sorry, I can't help myself. You're just fun to pick on. I'm reading the news right now. Like, my wife and I left Florida. One of the main reasons we moved away from there was to get away from the hurricanes. And now we're in New England. Like, I moved up here. I deleted all the hurricane tracking apps and all that crap from my phone. I'm like, I'm never going to have to deal with this nonsense again. And here comes Hurricane Lee. Pounding up the coast. And to make matters worse, my daughter turns 6 tomorrow. And my wife, in an effort to top herself every single year with birthday parties, this one got so big she couldn't actually hold it at our house. So she's doing it at the school, at my daughter's elementary school. And she's got there's inflatable stuff, like slides and bounce houses. And there's a rock climbing wall, and there's bungee cord jumping and all kinds of craziness all supposed to happen tomorrow, while the storm is basically barreling down on us. So I've got no idea how any of this is going to play out. But welcome to New England, Hurricane Central.
The sky.
Oh yeah, Hurricane rock
I'm right there
climbing.
with you.
Count me in.
That's one of the reasons why Kara and I built a house north of Austin instead of, because we came up on the Gulf Coast here in Texas, and hurricanes are just a fact of life. And she's like, no more hurricanes. Then we get up here and there's a polar vortex. I have to tell you, between the two, I'd rather deal with the hurricane.
Well, what honestly bothers me about this is in Florida, everything is built to deal with it, especially after Andrew. If you bought something built after Andrew, it's a freaking fortress. You can throw 150 mile an hour winds at it and, barely damages anything. But up here in New England, these houses are twigs, they're all wood construction. There's no storm shutters. They don't have any of that protection. I mean, I'm surrounded by, oak trees that are, twice my age, 100 years old, towering over the place. We lose one pretty much every winter. So there's a good chance we're going to lose a couple of them with the storm. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that scares me.
Yeah.
Anyway, what is in the news? JP is not here, so Kevin, you are on deck.
What? JP keeps telling everybody I'm not allowed to read the news, man.
So you have to do it then.
So I'm obligated.
You are.
JP, this one's for you. Patreon is going all in on community by giving fans their own space to chat and connect. Patreon is introducing new features, member profiles, and community chats aiming to bolster connection between creators and fans. Community chats will allow members to discuss creators' content, share opinions, and engage in real time outside the typical comments section. These chats are managed by the creators, ensuring a tailored and safe community experience. What an interesting thing. I don't use Patreon for anything right now, but the community thing is big with everybody.
I've got a Patreon account, but I haven't even opened it, logged in probably a year. I'm pretty sure if I tried, it would send me text me a code, and it would verify my identity and all these things because I haven't been in there. I'm sure this is a good thing for the people that are using it. A lot of these platforms are fantastic if you're all in and you take advantage of what's there. I'm just not that guy.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, I've got Patreon for my podcast, and that pays for everything, but not much more. And it just seems like it's kind of fallen off the cliff a little bit. Maybe this is something to kind of try to revive it. That's the feeling that I get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because I think community connection is always a good thing. But, a lot of authors already do this through Facebook, right? They start their Facebook
Yeah.
groups. And so, it's nice to have community connection. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. And I'm kind of getting this kick from Substack. Like I really feel I've been kind of all in on Substack lately, and they've got all these features that I'm still kind of learning and figuring out. But I've started getting paid now for the paid subscription stuff, and that's been a lot of fun. But what I'm noticing is like the free subscription stuff is just growing. Like I'm not doing anything to grow it, and it just keeps growing. And those folks are buying books because I am only promoting right now I've canceled all ads. I don't have any other email stuff going out. The only way I am promoting my books right now is a weekly Substack post, and
Wow.
I'm watching sales go up. Yeah. So
Well, you might actually be part of the problem or the reason Patreon did this sort of thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people, Patreon was huge a couple of years ago.
It was, yeah.
But they haven't really, they haven't really reinvented themselves. It's basically been the same platform for the last couple of years. And now you've got stuff like Substack out there that is working for authors. And they're probably seeing a lot of that user base that was, all over Patreon, back in the day, migrating to these other sites. So this is them clawing at that audience, trying to bring them back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely not going to say which one is better than the other, but I will say that the one of the things I like about Substack is it kind of combines several pieces into one tool, and it sort of has a lot of built-in discovery. I don't know if Patreon has. I know Patreon. I remember that Patreon has like a blog platform and things like that, right? I think. I actually don't recall.
They do.
So.
Yeah, they do, but I don't have the bandwidth or the time to even like play around with it.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Kevin, I'm not familiar with Substack. Do you get the emails? Like if people sign up, do you get like their emails to keep? Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Yeah. You own those
That's
lists.
huge.
That's the whole reason I decided to go with it. And I'm not even currently, and I'm a founder of Author Email, so I'm sort of betraying myself here a little, but I'm not even using that right now for my newsletter. I'm exclusively using Substack now. Yeah.
So Kevin, you're not sending out a monthly or a weekly newsletter anymore?
I am through Substack.
Oh, okay.
So you write a post in Substack, and you can say, I want this to go out to my mailing list, and you can choose either your paid list or your free list or both. And you can, and with the paid stuff, I can actually offer like previews of some of the content that's in the paid stuff to the free list. So that encourages them to convert to paid. That's slowly going up. I mean, I'm not making a fortune yet on it, but I'm making more than zero, which was my initial goal. So
there you go.
Yeah, fun stuff, man.
Excellent.
This show is not brought to you in any way by Substack. So moving on to the next news item, not mail item. Maybe it should. If you're listening,
Maybe it
Substack,
should.
I'm
Hey,
a
Substack,
big
that's
fan,
right.
and I also enjoy money. So a plague on the industry, book publishing's broken blurb system, which is kind of a tongue twister to say. The process of securing book blurbs relies heavily on personal connections, with authors often tapping networks from MFA programs, conferences, and publishers. Well-connected authors have a significant advantage when it comes to obtaining impactful blurbs, with data showing 89% of books published in 2018 were by white authors. Blurbs play a major role in influencing which book publishers, booksellers, and media to pay attention to, with blurbs driving decisions on publicity, events, and shelf placement. Some argue the blurb system exacerbates diversity issues and nepotism in publishing, as blurbs go to the authors who are already successful or well-connected. I personally don't buy books because, well, I'm a liar. I have bought books because an author's name was on the blurb, but that was when I was like a teenager, and I was kind of just hopeful that maybe they showed up in the book or something. But I personally don't buy books at this stage of my life just because I see Stephen King wrote a blurb about it or whatever. I mean, what about you guys?
I'm honestly a little thrown by the idea of a blurb system. Like, as far as I know, there is no blurb system. It's always been who you know, who you can tap. Your editor may reach out to people they know. Like, there's no, it's not easy for anybody. I mean, you talk to any big name author, they will tell you how they struggled to get blurbs when they were first coming up.
Right.
They'll tell you how much of a pain in the ass it gets, when you're on the other side, with everybody contacting you. Like it's hard to say no, and you have to. I mean, I've got a stack of ARC copies on my coffee table next to me that I will never be able to read, because I have a hard time saying no to some of these.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like it's not something like nobody is entitled to get a blurb. Nobody should expect to get a blurb. You have to make contacts. You have to cultivate those contacts. And if, you're a friendly person and you're good at networking, hopefully you can turn that into a blurb. That whole rant out of my mouth, it really honestly, like blurbs don't sell books, like Kevin mentioned. I've had this conversation with a lot of big name authors, and they will tell you like they can, put their name on the front, and like aside from, even, King, Patterson, and, the people you can name on one hand, that those blurbs just don't mean much. I did a study using Facebook ads years back for Fourth Monkey, and I noticed that the message itself was actually more impactful than who actually said it.
Right.
I had one blurb that was based literally from a no-name person, just somebody who just read a lot of stuff and was on Goodreads, and her ad, because of the wording of her particular blurb, it was clicked on like 86% over all the other ones I had. And I had a ton of big name authors out there. I also had film directors and other people that had commented on the book. So the message itself, like that I think is way more important than who actually says it. But yeah, there's no blurb system. You have to hustle. You have to try and get those yourself, and you can't even count on your publisher or your editor to do it for you.
See, I just put things like, this is the greatest book of all time. A blurb from Stephen King's The Stand from Boston Globe. And just put that on my cover. Because why not?
Sure.
I'm attributing it.
So just get AI to write your blurb. That's the lesson that we're getting here.
I put excerpts from all the restraining orders. So, or like the personal notes that they send me to tell me to leave them alone. I've never heard of this guy, Neil Gaiman.
I read this and I was thinking to myself, okay, life isn't fair. That's life.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's who you know. And though, like you just said, JD, it's like you have to build these relationships. You got to put yourself out there. And even at that, it may not work. So, and how are you going to police this? I looked at this and I'm like, really? Whatever.
What I thought was interesting was where they were talking about that there was some thought that people blurb books without reading them. I don't know.
Yes.
Is this a thing? Like you're getting pressure from your editor or your publisher to blurb someone else's book and you don't have time? I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure that's got to happen, right?
I promise you that.
People read maybe
absolutely.
the first chapter or whatever just to make sure it's not total garbage, and then they throw the blurb out there. Because most blurbs they're favors, like the ones that the ones I jump at, the ones that I do every single time are, the one my editor calls and requests something, like I really need your help to push this title, or my agent, people that help me, I help them back. Yeah, those are the ones that I tend to really work towards.
Well, that's interesting because do you think that they think that those are helping to sell books?
They do. And, I think that's part of the problem, because when you sign a contract, one of the first conversations you have with that editor, they want to know who you know, who can you get blurbs from? And then they'll tell you who they know, who they think they can get blurbs from. And 99% of the time you don't get any of those blurbs. You end up with different ones from other people. I can tell you the one thing that I have learned in this industry over time is it's better to get a blurb about you, the author, and your writing style, than it is to get something on a specific book. And what I mean is you want something generic, like if you're going to go to a big name author, ask them to give you a blurb that you can use on cover after cover after cover. It accomplishes two things. It basically gives you something that you can use repetitively. And it also means you're not going to have to bug that person again, because I've got authors that, they come at me with every single title that they write, I'm like, I just can't do that.
Yeah. Those are good points. Final news item here. More authors, including Michael Chabon. Is it Chabon? I'm terrible at these. Sure. Sue AI developers over copyright. Authors including Michael Chabon, David Henry Huang, and Rachel Lewis Snyder filed class action lawsuits against AI companies OpenAI and Meta. The lawsuits specifically allege OpenAI and Meta copied books without permission to train AI models like ChatGPT, including scraping copies from piracy sites. OpenAI argues in an August 28th filing that the lawsuit's claims are legally deficient and should be dismissed before proceeding to discovery. Legal experts say the copyright claims face challenges because of fair use defenses established in cases like Google Books and Kelly v. Aribasoft. Yeah, I'm hearing so much about this. I've heard there's a number of lawsuits now. And of course, some of the sources, they used any source of free books they could find. So like the Smashwords store has a selection of free books, and those got dragged into this. And that was a violation of our terms of service. So we've gotten involved in some of this as well. So I think they're right. There's nothing they're going to be able to do here. I think legally there's just no leg. And I know everyone hates to hear that, but I also don't think there's any actual harm either. So that's what I'm hoping comes out of the whole discussion, really.
I think there's so many of these popping up at this point, and it's really going to come down to whichever one gets to the Supreme Court first and gets heard and gets decided on, and then you're going to see a bunch of these just fall away. It's going to end up being one case decides them all. I know Paul Tremblay was one of the first to the table with this. I don't know if that means he's going to be the first case that gets that far. But yeah, you can only make the same argument so many times from so many different directions.
Right. Yeah. Cases like this, though, they have to show where there were damages. And how do you show that? Because it's not plagiarism, because they're not reusing that exact same content. It's a learning scenario. So that's going to make it really tricky to call out as some sort of copyright violation, because copyright doesn't cover that. And you can't retroactively install that to any effect. Best case would be, they put a rule in there and no one can use that going forward. I think that rule would get challenged as well, because I don't think there's enough actual damages or harm happening to the authors for this to actually be something we should worry about.
I really think we need to take all this AI computing power and we got to put it towards figuring out what's going on with your internet connection and really keep track of it.
You're kidding me. See, I don't know.
Let the AI solve it.
We can hear you.
I don't
we just
know when
can't
that's
see you,
happening.
Kevin.
So I will say this, though. Jeff has told us, like, all my stuff gets uploaded on my side. So no one else knows what you're talking about now, JD.
It is hilarious to just see a black screen and that your name is Internet the Betrayal. I mean, it's really hard to keep it together, honestly.
How ironic.
Yeah, sorry, guys. All right.
How ironic.
This episode is brought to you by AutoCrit. One of the most value-packed memberships for any author, AutoCrit brings you an amazing suite of tools that make it a breeze to plan, write, and edit your books all in one place. AutoCrit takes you far above standard grammar checking or cookie cutter guidance. Instead, it's like having an experienced editor in your genre watching over your shoulder to help you deliver great writing that keeps your audience trapped in the story. You can even compare your writing style to more than 100 best-selling authors right down to the word level, so you can see what the best in the business do to keep their storytelling clean, clear, and crisp. Listeners of the Writers Inc. podcast can now take advantage of lifetime membership for one single fee. That's right, no renewal fees.
Hi, this is JD Barker. I've used AutoCrit for years, and not only has it improved my writing, but it's been a crucial tool with aspiring authors that I've mentored. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just beginning, it'll help you find your weak spots and weed them out. Give it a shot with your latest project. Trust me, your editor will thank you.
Head to autocrit.com/JD to get your lifetime membership. Big thanks to AutoCrit for sponsoring the show.
And with that, JD, who's up this week?
All right, I'm probably going to butcher this guy's name again. I practiced, but
just call him Kosh.
Khashayar Khabushani. That's probably as close as I'm going to get. Kosh, way better. He was born in Van Nuys, California, and spent a portion of his childhood in Iran before returning to LA, where he studied philosophy at California State University in Northridge, completed an MFA program at Columbia, and currently works as a middle school teacher. His debut novel, I Will Greet the Sun Again, is out now. This guy's got a fascinating backstory, and the bulk of it is in this book, which is technically a fiction title, but he explains how all that happened. So here he is, Kosh.
So, Kosh, thank you first for being a part of the show. We really are glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
So, now we were chatting a little before the call, all the different time zones and everything. And you're in California. You're Pacific Coast right now?
Yeah, I'm in California. I'm in the Bay and living in San Francisco, which is it's been really dope after all the uh, rainstorms and thunderstorms. It's been a string of sunny days, so I'm enjoying it.
Really? Okay. Yeah, you're a native to the area.
Yeah, so to California, I grew up. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, which is in LA, which all us Valley girls like to call the Valley, and
Mhm.
grew up there. Went to did my undergrad at Cal State Northridge, which is about 10-15 minutes away from where I grew up, and then um, did some teaching and headed out to
Yeah.
New York like we all do.
Like everyone does. Yeah. So, yeah, so you did you were a middle school teacher for a while. Is that right?
Yeah. I for undergrad, I studied philosophy, and there's I couldn't recommend it more, but it sort of narrows
Yeah.
the work opportunities. So so
That's
teaching
true.
was yeah, it was a
I
good
did a
fit.
whole similar path. I mean, I taught mostly like high school age, but taught for I think every writer, you're either an attorney or you're a teacher at some point in your in your career. So
That's true. That's true. I didn't come to think
now I'm
about it.
thinking about law school. Uh all
Especially
right.
in this
So
time, right? We all need to get freaking our law degrees. Go do some good work.
don't we? I mean,
Yeah.
I am actually genuinely considering like going and taking maybe even just sort of sitting in on some courses about civil law and and how to and what your rights are and how to protect them, that sort of thing. So yeah, hopefully it doesn't come to everyone having to get a law degree though, man.
Yeah.
So well, let's talk a little bit about your writing journey then, because so you were a teacher. What happened? Were you writing while teaching, or was this something that happened afterward?
It's such a great question, because there's so many, for me at least, there's so many layers to that. Even I've been asking myself a similar question or a similar set of questions, and the reason for me it has a lot of layers is I didn't grow up reading or writing. I know that sounds maybe strange, but you know, one, immigrant parents, but then divorced parents, single mom. And for me it was sport. It was basketball. Like that was my first love. And it also, as a kid, it's nice to not have to be inside and stare at books and be forced to write or whatever. And but then as yeah I guess came of age and got to college and started actually uh reading and engaging with literature in a meaningful way. um for me it was just the astonishment of what certain stories or texts were evoking from me, and that made me pretty greedy to want to do it myself. And so that's sort of, yeah, towards the end of my time in college, I started recognizing that in myself. And then by the time I was teaching, I know some teachers that do this. I don't know how, like for me, especially as a middle school teacher, I was using a lot of the same emotions that I use when I'm writing. And so it wasn't like I was getting home or like
Mhm.
waking up at crack of dawn and like clacking away page after page. It was just weekends whenever I could, really.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. I mean, did you take did you take your summers off and that sort of thing, or did you work summers?
Yeah, it was a charter school, and what I say that because it was we were having to do a lot of preparation for the following years. Like there was no 2 summers that were the same, no 2 semesters that were the same. So again,
Yeah.
I know in New York, I've met some teachers who work at private schools, and it seems like there's a little bit more time
Yeah.
to have for themselves during the summer season.
Yeah, those were handy to have. In here in Texas, at least, there was plenty of time off between sessions, and there was lots of holiday time. So when I wanted to write, I had lots of blocks of time. But during that span of like in the classroom, it was a little tougher. But so I was
Well,
going
can I ask you
to
something about that?
you. Go ahead.
Because
Yeah,
like, did you feel like when you would have those summers off or even winters off, like, did you feel confident enough in like your classroom craft that you weren't panicked about not preparing? I always just felt that. And I admire teachers who are able to like compartmentalize and be like, I've got it under control.
Yeah, that was never, I always felt very confident in what was going to happen. It was very fluid.
God bless you.
I taught on an alternative campus, so everybody that came to me was quote unquote a troublemaker. So, I actually had some help in that. I got lesson plans and things from the primary campus, but yeah, I enjoyed the whole process really. But
wow.
But I'm actually, I'll be honest, I'm happy to move along from teaching. I was happy to start to start my other career. And so what led you then, like, what was the transition? Did you quit teaching and then start writing? Was that what you were saying? Or was this something you were dabbling with and then you kind of struck gold a little with maybe finding representation, or like, how did it come about?
Kind of, I guess for my age bracket and also the timing of it, I say it was the kind of, obviously it's not very traditional, but in some ways it is traditional. Like, I need to go do an MFA, which is like an entirely fraught thing and a lot of different opinions on it, blah, blah, blah. But for me, I didn't know shit about writing. I didn't know anything about how to find an agent. I didn't know about the publishing industry. And I figured, A, by being in New York, and B, by being at an MFA program, that would give me a chance. I remember talking to a friend. It's like, you start, you come to terms with reality, like, what the actual chances are that you find representation or that a publisher is then interested. I was like, well, it's like that line from Dumb and Dumber. It's like, you mean there's a chance? 1 in a fucking million? I'll take it.
Right. Yeah. What was that process like for you? I mean, you got the MFA, and I'm assuming you came out fully armed to go tackle the industry, and it was all super easy from there. Is what you're
Well, I'm really happy. I moved to New York like right after the school year had ended, so June, and the following year the MFA was going to start in late August, early September, and I moved to New York City. I found an affordable little shoebox apartment uptown, and I just got to work. Like oh man. It's really cool thinking about it. I just feel so far removed from now, so far along in the journey. But I remember quite frankly, and I had a typewriter at the time. I was just laughing because when I was like schlepping it through TSA, they looked at me like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And so I had this very romantic idea of moving to New York to become a writer. And anyways, I just remember sitting in my room and often weeping because it was this strange juxtaposition. I was so hungry and so desirous for this thing to tell the story. And then yet it felt cruel that you could want something so badly and have no idea how to do it, like even on a technical level, like not just the industry stuff, but not, like even just the art of fiction, the art of the craft of tone and voice and blah 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 blah. Like, yeah, it felt really, like I said, at times very, very cruel. But because the novel is heavily autobiographical, and I say that because it felt like it was in my bones. It's like I just had to get it out.
Yeah. Look, you're not a real writer until you've been crouched over a typewriter weeping at the injustice of the entire business. So you said is largely autobiographical. What prompted you to write a novel instead of, say, a memoir?
I'm glad you asked that, because I did my MFA in nonfiction, and so when I started out, and when I applied, and when I got to New York, and when I was that first summer writing, it was a memoir, but there was this like very distinct and clear pivotal moment where I was writing out a scene, and the narrator was describing something that was happening to him, and then it led to kind of an emotional state, or an unraveling that hadn't factually happened to me. And so I paused. It's like, well, that's not correct. I mean, I'm writing nonfiction and got to stick to the truth. And I don't know, I can't take credit for this. It was sort of like the grace of God that was like, well, just let him go where he wants to go. And if you end up writing a novel, you end up writing a novel. And so that was what transitioned me from writing a memoir to a novel, is that though it's still heavily autobiographical, it was really fun, and just learning from the narrator rather than me telling the narrator like what had happened.
Yeah. See, that's what's really interesting to me as a writer is, there is that line between fiction and nonfiction, but it seems like, and maybe you agree with this, maybe not, you can correct me if you don't agree with this, but it seems an awful lot like sometimes to tell the truth, fiction is the better tool, because you're not necessarily trying to report the facts, right? You're trying to craft a narrative that relays an idea, relays a truth, right?
Yeah. Two things. I mean, as soon as you were saying that, I remember hearing the writer Zadie Smith say something about how, in her, I believe, if I'm not misquoting, like in her eyes, journalism is the only thing that's like nonfiction, and everything else is fiction, like including personal essay and memoir, because it's so deeply subjective. You and I grow up raised by the same parents in the same house. You sit down to write a memoir about, it's going to be a very different memoir than my writing of it. And so that's one thing. But then to your point, like if we are sort of speaking strictly to genre, I do, in this case, it was amazing to see how much more of the truth I could tell once I disabused myself of, or like freed myself of having to strictly write in like quote unquote nonfiction. To this day, it still floors me. Like and I'm talking like learning things about myself too, like my biography, because something in my psyche was like, well, we get to make it up, so now I can really tell you what happened.
In terms of in terms of the fiction and what it revealed to you, what were some of the surprises that it revealed about yourself?
Yeah, that is such a good question. Well, I think there's like an entire, I guess the most truthful way of answering that question is, what it revealed to me is that my sort of fully cohesive and like integrated self began at 26, which is when I started writing this book. And what I mean by that is, leading up to me moving to New York, there were so many fractures like constantly happening, like trauma, really severe and intense trauma, not every single day, but from childhood onward. And so there was really there was just these like windows of living that I got to have. But it wasn't until I got to New York where I was able to really integrate all of those pieces of myself. And I think with the novel in particular, because it takes place in those formative years, like it takes place when he's 7 up until 18. I got to know myself for the first time, like as a young person, which is so extraordinary to be able to do. Like, I mean, I think that's why I love teaching middle school, is like getting to see these like really malicious and beautiful and sweet and complicated human beings, and resilient, and to get to experience that for myself and feel it for myself, because I'm writing an autobiographical novel. And the last thing I'll say to that question, to like give a more concrete example, is what it revealed to me about myself is that no matter how like horrific, I mean, part of the book, one of the things that happens is the father decides to take Kay, the narrator, and his 2 older brothers away from their mother without telling their mother, back to Iran, overnight. And something like that happening, and then yet this young narrator like still being not just open to love but searching for it.
Yeah,
it was really, that was one of the biggest like gifts of writing this novel. Like, oh, you can do that. Like, it's like no matter what has happened, and that to me is, I mean, that's God. Like, it's a miracle. I just
that's pretty incredible and moving. I mean, that's a moving concept right there, that to face tragedy or face challenges and come out still not just looking for love but capable of love. Like, you see people kind of get cut off from that because of their life experiences. So and how much of that sort of thing was actually autobiographical? Was the whole thing
all of it, like being, my pops took my brothers and I from our mom, and I remember just being in the airport, waking up on the plane, being in and it was also the kind of complicated aspect of it is like, to this day, I wish I could live in Iran, and then yet I'm so fucking American. I mean, I was born in Los Angeles, and so it's just this really strange paradox to have this deep love for ancestry, and then yet like being there and being so confused by why people weren't doing more Western things.
I imagine. I mean, I've not been to Iran. All I know of it is things I've seen or read, in media.
It's so stunning. It's such a stunning place. Like the architecture alone, the mosques, like the food. I mean, and one misconception is like, one of many, and I even before the Muslim ban was like fully in effect, I got to go back, and one thing that even startled me or surprised me was how much the Iranian people love Americans. Like, they're just so many questions, so excited, like they want to know about like the film, the art, even the petty thing, like the day-to-day. They're also convinced like we're all growing money on our trees. So it's just this funny experience that is counteract. Now, when I say the Iranian people, like I don't mean the regime. The regime has entirely different.
They're different. Yeah. No, I'm flying straight to Iran now, and I'm going to introduce myself.
Please do.
That is something though. Like we get all our impressions of things. I mean, it's never quite as clear cut as people kind of tend to want to make it. Like, we spent our whole pandemic traveling, mostly in the U.S. I mean, we were van lifing and we were traveling in the U.S. and
Wow.
There are actually regions of the United States that are vastly different from where I'm from. And what I discovered was that once you were in a place, you had this conception from TV or film, but once you were in there, and I'm sure it was the same for you, although you were young.
Yeah,
Maybe there wasn't a
yeah.
ton of context.
No, it's exactly what you say, and maybe to your point of being in these different parts of the states that maybe otherwise you haven't spent time with. I think ultimately when the kind of the surface level differences, once those peel back, I think what's amazing to me is realizing how we're all just the same.
Yeah.
You know, like we all have the same like wants and needs. The way we go about it might be different, but that was something even as a kid, when I was there, being surprised by is like, how is it that somebody who couldn't be more different from the way I present, and yet you just get this sense that they're after the same things in their life. And that was, I guess that makes it kind of hard as a writer, because you want to respect the individuality of a place and the ethos and all that. And yet for me, I can't help but just be like, yeah, this is humanity. And I just want to show that.
Yeah. That's something I'm always curious about is, when you are experiencing other cultures, what should you focus more on? I mean, should you focus more on the differences, or should you focus more on the similarities? I mean, because you're presenting that culture as a microcosm within United States culture, but there's still that difference, and that's how K stands out from his peers. So let's talk a bit about K then, and what are the things that make up his like genetics, I guess, both literally and figuratively.
Yeah, I remember giving this example before, but the way I see it is when I see him like climbing down from his bunk bed. They live in this small apartment with their mom, and I see him like tiptoeing between all these buckets that are like signed with different parts of his identity. And so he's Iranian American, he's also Muslim, he's also queer, he's the youngest brother of 3. He's a mama's boy. He's a victim of sexual abuse. So there's like all of these things. He's got a best friend named Johnny who's he's crazy about. And yet I think like what it goes back to your sort of the question that we talked about earlier is, I think the thing that ultimately stands out, like even with all these buckets, is this desire to know others and to be known in a very intimate way.
Yeah.
So that to me, and that I think, to the point about like, if you are writing about a culture or a place different from the one you grew up in or that you are part of, I guess it all depends on what's driving the writer to want to do that. And for me, there's nothing more delicious than the opportunity to be known and to know, to tell and to listen in a very just like, we're sitting in front of each other and we're just doing this, and let's see where this takes us, while also knowing that there are these in the both in the background and in the foreground, there are these very varying qualities that may be happening between us, and that's both that's included in the experience that we're having, of course.
I like because in this sort of write-up you guys sent us, it says that Kay just wants to be an American boy shooting hoops with his older brothers, riding his Huffy with his buddies. I read that and I'm like, that's my childhood. I did that, shooting hoops and riding my bike, and of course mine was a mongoose, but 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 the before and after of that for Kay and for you, like was this a story about that contrast and trying to get back to that, or was it sort of like always this piece that got left behind and was always going to be nostalgically remembered and that sort of thing? What was it for you?
Yeah, it because the circumstances of going at that age were so traumatic. That definitely colored the desire to want to, and just like missing mom, missing Johnny, like all of those elements that are drawing came back. But also when he does get back, and especially like post puberty, as he's beginning to kind of reach back and try to integrate some of those things that he experienced with his aunt in Iran. His aunt is the one that gets the boys back to their mom. He's exposed to Farooq Farrokhzad, who's an incredible Iranian poet. And he's exposed to poetry through his aunt. But then 9/11 happens, but also not just 9/11, but also he doesn't exactly have a father who's setting a shining example, which is why he doesn't even go by his full name. He calls himself K because it doesn't feel that there's any space or place for that. And so it's never, as we know, like it's never linear. It doesn't start off with like resenting Iran and then just having this like kind of return. It's non-linear. He dips in and out of those different identities, and his relationship to them changes as well.
Yeah. Well, we're close to having to wrap up. But I wanted to ask you a question. It's kind of one of those, like, it's not a gotcha question or anything, so don't feel put on the spot or anything. But what would you say was the best writing advice you got prior to writing the novel?
It actually came from, and this is sort of dancing around the question because I don't know if we can call it direct advice, but it actually came from my students who I was teaching at the time, my middle school kiddos. And long story short, at the end of the year, they had written, each of us teachers, gratitude letters for it was a really nice exercise, both for the teachers to receive those letters, but also for the students to exercise that muscle of gratitude. And the lesson that I received from them, because up until then, I was reading writers, David Foster Wallace, and writers that I still respect and enjoy reading, but who wrote in a register entirely different from the one that I would eventually write in. And the advice that I got from my students, without them knowing it, is in those gratitude letters, although a lot of them, these were 8th graders who had a reading level that was, second grade, third grade reading level. And so I say that to say diction and syntax, those things wasn't quote unquote correct. And yet, when I was reading their letters, I could see and hear each of them so fucking distinctly. And it just was this moment where I put down the letters and I thought, I'm never going to try to write in a way that I think I'm supposed to. I'm just going to write with the language that I have, however limited that may be, which in the case, often I do feel that my language is limited or limiting. But to me, having an 8th grader write a letter and communicate very difficult emotions, but to do it so clearly was, I held on to that forever. I'll hold on to that for the rest of my life.
This episode is sponsored by the book marketing experts at Written Word Media. They know that marketing your book can be a challenge, and that's why they make marketing simple by providing quick, easy, and effective ways to promote your books. When you schedule a promotion with Written Word Media, your book is emailed to tens of thousands of readers who love your genre. It's exposure that's hard to find any other way. You can even choose a ready-made promo stack that includes multiple promos over a short period of time to help boost your title's rank on retailers like Amazon. The best part? Scheduling your promo only takes 5 minutes and comes with world-class customer service. Over 30,000 authors trust written word media with their book marketing. See why at writtenwordmedia.com today.
So have you guys ever learned something about writing from someone who was not a writer?
Yeah. I was identifying with the middle graders. I don't know if this is about writing, but I have learned so much because I work with middle graders about slang, honesty, and, I think taking lessons from other places and applying them to your writing is such an important thing to do.
It's funny in listening to that because he got emotionally moved when he was reading those letters. And me being an Aspie, I have like zero emotion. So I'm thinking, what really got you is the fact that it was a first person narrative. And this is why debut authors need to use a first person narrative, because it grips the reader. These are kids that are not writers, but because they're wrote in first person, it felt legit. And he actually kind of stumbled through a very important point. A lot of authors, when they're writing that first book, even if they write it in first person, they're trying to get to a particular voice out of their head. And what really ends up happening as an author, when you write, a lot of words, 500,000 words or so, you literally find your own voice. You basically forget to, you stop writing in the voice you want to be, and you start writing in the voice that you actually are. And that's essentially what those letters were from those 8th graders. So that just kind of validates that whole theory.
Yeah, not knocking people who go out and get an MFA, but sometimes the greater knowledge comes from some 8th grade kid instead of spending all that money on that MFA.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to knock writing programs. I think there can be some value in those, but all the best writers I've ever met learned the craft, kind of pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. I don't know very many. I know there's a handful. I know Stephen King did a writing program or something, but he was also writing all his life before that, so he may not count.
Well, his actual degree was in that he became a teacher. But it really, I think in order to succeed in this, you need to read. If you read enough, that story structure, everything from the grammar, punctuation, and where the plot twist needs to happen, all those things get ingrained in your subconscious, and then you can crank them out on your own. An MFA program can try to teach that, and some of them are successful at teaching that. But the other portion of this is the what I call the storyteller gene. I think some people are just born storytellers. You can always learn the rules and everything else. You can teach that, but you can't teach the storyteller gene. It's either something you have or you don't have.
Well, I think it's two things. I think it's hard work, putting in the hard work of actually, the repetitions. And secondly, the interesting lives that these people have led while they're writing or before they were writers. You can kind of tell somebody who's been in their basement and hasn't really done a whole lot of anything in their life compared to somebody who's been out there and has done some cool stuff.
Well, like one of the things that Kosh mentioned is his father, literally picked him and his brother up and took them to Iran, without telling their mother that this was happening. Like, first of all, I can't even imagine that scenario, as a father of a, soon to be 6-year-old, what would it be like to wake up in the morning and find your spouse and your children just gone and then learn that they're in another country? So like, there's two stories going on there. There's the side with the father and what played out at home. I'm grateful for the fact that he took the time to actually write out, his side of the story, what he experienced, because things like that should definitely be talked about, or at least end up on paper, so people do understand what happened, that these kind of things do happen out there in the world, because it's a crazy scenario to play out, and it played out, and like I would hate for that to just disappear, not be talked about.
Well, I have a friend, his name is Rick Prado. He was a CIA officer, and he was born in Cuba. When he was 6 years old, Castro was overthrowing the Batista regime. So he was slotted. He had a very high IQ. He was slotted to go to Moscow for retraining. And his parents had no say in the matter. They're just going to whisk him off to Moscow. So they sent him off to America. It was called Operation Peter Pan to get him out of Cuba. And he was 6 years old, and he wound up in an orphanage, a Catholic orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado. Didn't know English, from Cuba. And it took 2 years before he was reunited with his parents. And he grew up to be a badass, like, special ops guy in the Air Force. He was a PJ, if you know what the PJs are. They're the pararescue people. And then he wound up getting recruited by the CIA. He was also a firefighter paramedic in Miami during, like, the cocaine wars. I mean, you sit down and talk to somebody like that. He wrote a book called Shadow Warrior. It's amazing to talk to people like that.
And, frankly, a story like that, like, I would rather hear it straight from the guy, just writing it up. Like, imagine if he then went and got an MFA and, like, and they taught him how to tell his story. You're going to get a different story.
Right. It wouldn't
I would rather, even if it was, even if it was wrought with, like, grammatical errors or whatever, I want to hear that story out of that guy's mouth as close to the real thing as possible.
Yep. That's
true. So, what do you guys think your fiction reveals about you?
I think my life is really boring, for the most part. And I think I live a lot of the experiences, the entertainment side of life through my characters. Like if I've done crazy stuff. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've shot a sniper rifle at the FBI Academy. I've done stuff like that. But I think I get a lot of the enjoyment out of life through what my characters do. If I wasn't writing, I would probably be out there hiking. I would be out there camping. I would be doing a lot more adventurous type stuff that I actually don't do in my real life because I've got people on paper doing it for me.
Yeah, but JD, in your earlier days, you were, like, carting around rock stars. You were in this little community that almost none of us have ever seen from the inside.
Yeah, but it comes down to what I just said. Like, if I don't sit down and write all that stuff out, like those memories, those experiences, and everything, they're gonna vanish. And there are some crazy stories there that I need to write out at some point.
I think you should.
I'd probably be dead if I was still in that particular life. It's probably a good thing that I'm sitting behind a desk right now.
Keith Richards is alive.
I kind of feel that too. Yeah, it's like stuff happened when I was younger, but now my life is pretty boring. So I've got to entertain myself and. I guess anyone who reads my books probably knows that I'm a horrible, socially awkward introvert. And that's probably what my books say about me. So there you go. I'm the one that's like, have a nice flight. And I'm like, you too, person still staying on the ground. So that's what it says about me, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, a lot of what I write is very, most of my books are like archaeological thrillers. And so they actually are like an expression of my actual interests, like the things that I'm passionate about. So, maybe that says I would not call myself adventurous, but I mean, I'm well traveled and I've gone to plenty of places that I think a lot of people would envy. I'm an explorer. I'm nomadic. So those books do kind of reflect that. So, and they all come from that. That's always the source of my stuff. This is, I run into people. I had a conversation recently with someone, who was a full-time writer, but got offered a job, a desk job based, not a desk job, like a sort of almost a sales job. But they noticed that once they started working that job, they were writing more. And the discussion we had was like, when you have all this infinite time to write, like there's a kind of paralysis that can come over you. Have any of you ever experienced like having just too much time to write?
I think to a certain extent that's true. I mean, like when I was writing, Fourth Monkey and Forsaken, I was doing that while I had the day job, and I would squeak out, like 300 words, like standing in line, like at the grocery store waiting for checkout, like I would get my phone out knowing that was going to be my only time to get words down, and I'd get them down. So I think there's an urgency to it that kind of pushes you. It's your feet are to the fire, versus now where I get up, at the crack of 7 a.m. I put my butt in my chair at 8. I've got the entire day to crank out those couple thousand words that I need to do for the day. And yeah, I think it's a little bit more laxed for sure. I do notice that on the days where I have something going on, like tomorrow's my daughter's birthday party, starts at noon. That means I'm gonna have to, try and knock everything out a little bit earlier. I'm sure I'll get my words. I'll get them done a little bit faster, just knowing that I have to.
Yeah, I think it's a universal truth that tasks take the time that you have to do them. That's the way I find anyways. As I found out in the pandemic, tasks take the time that I have to do them.
Yeah, the first 4 books I wrote were while I was still working full time, and you just did it when you could do it. And then after that, okay, now I've got free time. Unless I had strict deadlines, that's what I need. I need a deadline. I need an editor saying, hey, I need this book by this date. And then that paralysis goes away. And then it's like, okay, I have to do like 1,500 words a day, or else I'm going to be behind, and she ain't going to be happy with me. And I really want her to be my editor, and I don't want to piss her off, et cetera, et cetera. You want to keep the wheels moving. Example, last night, I wrote, I went to a cigar bar at 9:00 at night, and I wrote till midnight. But that's when you do have all that time, you can be very flexible with your writing. I was busy during the day, and it's like, I feel like having a stogie and a drink, and I'm just going to write for a while. When I was working full time, I couldn't do that because I'd have to be up at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we're running out of time. So I'll just say, JD, who's up next week?
Next week, we've got MP Woodward. Mike is a veteran of both U.S. intelligence ops and the entertainment industry. He's worked alongside U.S. Special Forces, CIA, NSA, before transitioning to the private sector and becoming a writer. His latest novel is called Dead Drop, and he's going to explain how he incorporated his real-world experience into his fiction.
Yeah, sounds like it's going to be a fun interview. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode, and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.